Okay, number 1. We have 3x squared equal 4 minus 11x. Now, what kind of equation is this? Quadratic. Okay. When solving a quadratic equation, remember last time we used a property. What property did we use at some point? Do you remember? Zero factor property. Very good. Some of you remembered. Not all of you, because not all of you said anything. But at least one person did. Zero factor property. If I'm going to use a zero factor property, what number should be on the other side? Zero. Okay, good. All right. So number 1, if necessary, rewrite the equation in general form. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Then you factor completely. You factor completely. Number 3, apply the zero factor property. So we said each factor equal to 0. And then you solve the equation. And then you check if you want to check. Okay? All right, so that's what we did. We're going to do a few more again. Okay, so is this in general form? No, it's not. All right, so I got to bring every term to one side. So if I bring the 4 over, it becomes a negative 4. Negative 11 x over becomes a positive. And let's put in descending order. So if I go to the next step, what should I write? Minus 4 equal 0. All right. And then you factor. All right, you factor. Now, for the most part, we're going to have trinomials. So first thing you should always look for, though, is the GCF. So if I look at those 3 terms, what's the GCF? Every polynomial has a GCF. What's the GCF?
12.
No. 12 doesn't go into all of these evenly. Huh? 1. GCF is 1. GCF is 1. Since the GCF is 1, there's really nothing you can take out. So now we're going to go to those 2 binomials. All right, so remember the reverse FOIL. So for 3x squared, what do you want to try? 3x and x. For 4, what do you want to try?
1 and 4.
1 and 4.
Negative 1.
2 and 2. What do you want to do first? What do you think works? You see, at this point, see, you're not in Math 99 anymore. So at this point, you need to recognize what it is. 4 and 1, you think works?
Yeah.
Okay.
1 and 4.
Yeah. So in other words, you're going to put the 4 here and the what?
1.
1 there. Very good. That's where it goes, by the way. So at this point, guys, seriously, at this point, we're not learning factoring. That was last semester. That was almost quite a bit of last semester. And the last sign's negative. That means these signs in here are different. So which one do you think is the 4? Positive. And this is the... Now, even before you go further, check. What's the outer? 12x. What's the inner?
Negative 1x.
When I add them up, do I get a positive 11x? Yes. All right. So that was step 2, right? That was step 2. What's the next step? Once I factor, notice I have 2 factors whose product is 0. What does that say about one of them? At least one of them better be what? 0. I don't know which one, so I'm going to use what property? Zero factor property. And so I said each one equal to 0. So I get 3x minus 1 equals 0. X plus 4 equals 0. So notice I went from a quadratic equation to 2 linear equations. Over here, what does 3x equal? 1. So what does x equal? 1/3. So there's one of your solutions. Over here, what does x equal? So those are your 2 solutions. So I solved this quadratic equation. Notice the steps now. Notice the steps. So at some point, I factor completely, and then I use a zero factor property. And again, notice that I went from a quadratic equation to 2 linear. All right, number 2. Number two, suppose we had this. Suppose we had y times y minus 3, those are both y's, equals 4. Y, that's a y. Y times y minus 3 equal 4. All right, tell me what you do.
Distribute.
All right. Yes, don't make the mistake and overgeneralize. Here's what some students do. They see, hey, it's already factored, so I'm going to say each factor equal to 4. No. You don't set each factor equal to 4. The zero factor property says you got to set each factor equal to what? 0, but you better have what on the other side? 0. I don't have that here. So I must do what first? Distribute first. So I get y, what? Squared minus 3y equal 4. All right, now what's the next step? No. Put it in general form. I got to have 0 on the other side. So I got y squared minus 3y minus 4 equal 0. All right. And then you factor. The GCF is 1. So let's just factor 2 binomials. That one's easy to do. That's y, and what I'm going to use. 4 and 1, right? So 4 has to be what, though? Negative. 1 has to be positive. And check it. The outer is 1y. The inner is a negative 4y. When I add them up, I get a negative 3y. What's the next step?
Each one equal to 0.
So each one equal to 0. So I get x is 4. Oh, that's y. I'm sorry, y. So y is 4. And what's y over here? Negative 1. Okay, number 3. V squared minus 5v equal 0. V squared minus 5v equal 0. So what are you going to do there? First of all, is it in general form? Yes. Yes, it is. Why you said no? Just tell me why you think you said no. Oh yeah, the constant's missing, but general form basically means that yeah, everything's on one side, zeros on the other. Yeah, but you're right, the constant is missing. That's okay, but it's still considered general form. Yeah. What's the next step though? Factor completely. How do I factor the left-hand side? Very good. The GCF is a V. That's your GCF. So in the previous two, the GCF was 1. Now the GCF is V. So I can factor out of V. When I factor out of V, I get V times what? And what does that equal? 0. Now notice that these two right here. See, they almost look identical, except this is 0 and this is what? 4. Here, what property am I going to use now? What property? 0 factor property. Here I couldn't do that. I had to do what first? Distribute, because that was not a 0, that was a 4. Okay, so notice the difference between the two. All right, now I can use a 0 factor property because I have two factors whose product is what? 0. So I said each one equal to 0, so tell me what to write. And then? So notice I went from a quadratic to 2 linear. You just solve for v, get v by itself. Here, v is already by itself, so there's nothing else to do. So one of my solutions is what? 0. Here, what's the other solution? 5. Okay, number 4. What if you had this? Is this in general form? Yes. Everything's on one side, zeros on the other. And it's in descending order. But how do you factor this? Do you remember? What is that? How are you going to factor this? I mean, you can still do the two binomials. The GCF is 1, right? Y'all agree the GCF is 1? So now go to the two binomials. Tell me what to put. What do you think this is? I was hoping you'd recognize it right away.
It's squares.
Difference of two squares. Difference of two squares. Remember the difference of two squares? So remember, if it's a difference of two squares, you can fill in these parentheses right here. So what times itself is 4x squared?
2x.
2x. What times itself is 1?
1.
1. So that's the difference of two squares. So then you factor the difference of two squares by saying 2x minus 1 times 2x plus 1. So the difference of two squares. So that's 2x minus 1, 2x plus 1. And that's equal to what? 0. What's the next step? Zero factor property. Set them both equal to 0. Over here, 2x equal 1. So what's x? Positive 1/2. Well, this one's positive 1/2. The other one will be negative. So I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I got it.
That's all right. Multiplication is commutative. It didn't matter which one you put first. Okay? All right. Let's look at number 5, the last one for this one. Okay. Is this in general form? Yes. So let's factor. The GCF is 1, right? So let's factor this. For 8x squared, what do you think you may want to try? Let's try 4 and 2 first. So 4x and 2x. The last term is 1, so it's obvious that you're going to use which two factors? 1 and 1. Last sign is positive 1, so it's obvious that those signs are going to be the same. And what sign will it be?
Negative.
Negative, because the middle sign is negative. So you remember some things from last semester. That's a good sign. And before you go on, check. What's the outer? Negative 4x, right? What's the inner? Negative 2x. When I add them up, what's a negative 4x and a negative 2x? Negative 6x, which is what I wanted. So what I have is correct. What's the next step? Yeah, zero factor property. Good. So 4x equal 1. So what does x equal? 1 over 4. Over here, 2x equal 1. So what does x equal? 1/2. Okay. So that was solving a quadratic equation by factoring. Okay. Now, before we go on to the quadratic formula, let's kind of review something last class period that I forgot that I meant to do when we did this part today, and that's this one. So this is a review. This is a review. All right, so again, this is a review from last class period. Look at this right here and tell me what's the best way, what's the most efficient way to solve this equation. First of all, what kind of equation is this? What kind of equation is this? Linear? Why do you say quadratic? Yeah, if I were to follow this out, wouldn't this be x squared? Okay, so it's quadratic. But what's the best way to solve this equation? Square root property. Square root property. Okay? Square root property. Remember we talked about that last class period. Whenever you have something squared equal a number, to get this expression by itself, that's where you take the square root of both sides. Remember that? But remember, when you do the square root of both sides, what else do you have to put? Plus or minus. All right, so square root property. All right, so go over here. That's the most efficient way of doing this problem. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. I get plus or minus. So the square and the square root undo each other. So what's left over here? X minus 3 equal plus or minus. Now we have to simplify the square root of a negative 28. So I go off to the side and I figure out what that is. First of all, notice I am taking the square root of a negative number. So that's where you have that I in front. So this becomes I times the square root of 28. But then you got to ask yourself, can I simplify the square root of 28? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yes, because what perfect square goes into 28?
4.
4. Isn't 28 4 times 7? So what we did was we said, well, this is going to be I times the square root of 4 times 7. And then you can do these steps or you can skip some, but that would be I times the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. And what's the square root of 4? 2. So this becomes 2I square root of 7. Or if you want to, you can write it as 2 square root of 7 and then times I.
Okay.
So this becomes 2I square root of 7, right? And then all you do is get x by itself by doing what to both sides? Add 3. So this is x equals 3. So you add 3, right?
Yeah.
So that's 3 plus or minus 2I square root of 7. Okay, now, you can leave your answer like this on the worksheet. On my math lab, though, they ask you to separate the solutions using commas. How many solutions do I have? 2. So in my math lab, you're going to say 3 plus 2I square root of 7 and comma, and what's the other? Square root of 7. Okay? All right. So that was a quick review from last time. Okay? All right. Now, we're about to talk about the quadratic formula.